So welcome back guys to another video, and one of my favorite pastimes growing up was going to my local arcade, and I felt like arcade cabinets were everywhere. So I know I've talked about arcades in the past, but I thought what I'd do for this video is talk about my top 10 favorite arcade games of all time.
Number 10 is G.I. Joe, a real American hero. Now, not only was this one of my favorite arcade games, but it was also one of my favorite Saturday morning cartoons. Released in 1992 by Konami, you controlled either Duke, Snake Eyes, Scarlet, or Roadblock, and your characters were on rails with almost a 3D perspective, controlling the crosshairs and taking down Cobra Commander. Now, one thing I will say, a very sad note about this game is unfortunately it was never released on home consoles. So the only way to play this is either with MAME, or if you're lucky enough, you can find a cabinet somewhere. But I really could have seen this game being on the Sega Genesis, or maybe using the Super Nintendo's Mode 7. It would have been almost close to being arcade perfect. And number 9 is Alien vs. Predator, an excellent beat 'em up from Capcom. And while Capcom has a lot of fantastic beat 'em ups, this is one I really enjoy. Maybe I just love the fact that I love Xenomorphs so much, and I love Predator, and I really love the anime style they did on the humans. And this is a 4-player beat 'em up style action game, and if you had yourself and a bunch of friends over playing this at like Chuck E. Cheese or at the boardwalk, it was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, just like G.I. Joe, this was never released on consoles, maybe due to a license or copyrights. And I know there's another one, the Alien vs. Predator, on Super Nintendo and I believe Sega Genesis, but don't get it twisted, it is not the same game. This is definitely a game that cannot be missed, and I surely recommend it to you guys, even if you have to use MAME. It's freaking awesome. Number 8 is Strider, another Capcom classic, released in 1989. I don't know what it was, but about the 80s and the 90s, we loved our ninjas. And while Strider's not exactly the ninja like Shinobi or Ninja Gaiden, he was still a part of a special operation taking down the Soviet Socialist Republic. So he was taking down a bunch of terrorists and bad guys, even had cutscenes to it and voice clips, which at that time really blew my mind. And I love the pixel animation, and I love the way he just moved and the flips. This is just a fantastic game. And what's really awesome about Strider is you can also get it, of course, on the NES, the Sega Genesis, but there's countless Capcom collections that have this in almost arcade perfect form. If you guys have not played Strider yet, what are you guys doing watching this video? Go play some Strider. Number 7 is Hammering Harry, released in 1990 by IREM. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I just absolutely love this game, and I don't hear enough people talk about this arcade classic, and I hold it really dear to my heart, because I remember Saturday nights being at a skating rink, my sister being in the corner with her friends skating to Mariah Carey. Me, on the other hand, I was trying to save my house from a bunch of corrupted construction workers. In Hammering Harry, you control Harry, who is trying to save his house, and you have various different power-ups in this very action-packed platformer. So much fun. And unfortunately, it didn't get a whole lot of love in North America. I know in Europe, it was released on the Famicom. They also released another version of Hammering Harry, a more rebooted sequel on the PSP called Hammering Heroes, which is a lot of fun. But it just wasn't the same as Hammering Harry. I would love to see maybe like a collection of the various sequels they came out with as well, and they even spawned an anime. Number 6 is Toki, released in 1989 by Taito. This game right here, I mean to tell you, my first introduction to Toki was actually from a Nickelodeon show called Nick Arcade. And once I saw that game, I knew I wanted to play it so freaking bad, and I was lucky enough to play on the arcades when I went to the Boys and Girls Club during summer. And I would spend so many afternoons trying to get through this game. It's a very challenging platformer. Now, the story with Toki goes, you and your girl are having a great time when all of a sudden an evil witch doctor comes out of nowhere, steals your girl away, and turns you into this giant ape. Now, if you guys have not had a chance to play Toki, you can also play it on the Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, called Toki Going Ape Spit. And this is definitely a game to check out. It's very challenging. I know the arcade was definitely a quarter stealer because you would die with one hit. So if you find the arcade, I hope you have a fistful of quarters and a lot of patience because it is quite rewarding.
Number 5 is the granddaddy beat 'em up of them all, in my opinion, of course, and that is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, released in 1989 by Konami. This was a game that really doesn't need any sort of introduction. If you were growing up in the 80s or 90s, or hell, even now, then you already know who the TMNT Heroes in the Half Shell are all about. But what made this arcade game very interesting was how much it took ideas and animations from the cartoon, so it was very familiar, and it also had 4-player co-op, so each of you and your friends could choose your favorite turtle and kick some foot ass. And you kick a lot of foot soldiers, a lot of familiar bosses that you would recognize from the cartoon, and of course the evil Shredder and Crane, and save the damsel in distress, April O'Neil.
Number 4 is Ghosts and Goblins, released in 1985 by Capcom. This is definitely another Capcom classic, which in my opinion were pretty much the kings of arcade at that time. And man, you know, we all know arcade games are there to steal your quarters, and this game is really no exception. Ghosts and Goblins really introduced us to time signatures and having a strategy. When you play this game, you had to know what you were getting yourself into. And I always really loved the graphics to Ghosts and Goblins and the music. I've always been a big fan of the macabre and horror movies, so when I was a kid and seeing someone like Arthur running around as a knight, shooting down Frankenstein and zombies and vultures, I knew I had to play this game. And even to this day, this is a game that if I see it inside the arcades, I have to put down my quarter and I have to play it. And it's still hard for me to this day, but it is what it is, and it's super enjoyable.
Number 3 is Mortal Kombat 2. Released in 1993 by Midway Games, Mortal Kombat 2 offered everything we would expect from a sequel. While the first Mortal Kombat showed us a bunch of gore and a bunch of violence, Mortal Kombat 2 brought that level over 9,000, featuring a much larger roster of characters, more blood and more gore than you can shake a stick at, and fatalities that were just absolutely epic. I remember playing this game at the Boys and Girls Club, and we played this game so much they actually took the cabinet out of the facility because kids were no longer playing basketball, we were no longer swimming, enjoying outdoor activities. We were all glued to this cabinet, and to this day it's probably one of my favorite Mortal Kombats in the entire series. And I'm so glad they have so many different ports, and I remember when they released the Mortal Kombat collection on Xbox 360, it really made me feel so nostalgic going back and playing people online and reliving the good old days of the arcades. Number 2 is Street Fighter 2, released in 1991 by Capcom. And there's no doubt whenever you're talking fighting games that of course Street Fighter will get a name drop. It's probably because it's the grandfather of all fighting games and really helped put the arcade scene back on the map in the 90s. This is such an important game and one of my absolute favorites. One of the things I noticed when I first played Street Fighter 2 was this is the first arcade game I played that had 6 buttons, and while that sounds really obsolete at this time, that was really something else. I mean, I felt like I was in total control. I felt like I was reliving a badass 80s action movie with Steven Seagal or Jean-Claude Van Damme. Wait a minute. But this game was absolutely amazing. I loved it, and I felt like a Street Fighter cabinet was everywhere. I remember going inside Burger King, of all places, and seeing an arcade cabinet of Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition, and not even wanting to go to the ball pit. I totally did not want to go there. I wanted to go and play some Street Fighter 2, and to this day, I feel like a arcade is not an arcade unless they have a Street Fighter 2 cabinet.
And my number 1 favorite arcade game of all time is Donkey Kong. And who would have thought that this cabinet would revolutionize video games, introduce us to characters like Donkey Kong and Mario, and most notably put Nintendo on the map, and help Shigeru Miyamoto get his kickstart into making a bunch of very fun games that we would enjoy for the next 30 years plus. Now, most notably, this is such a simplistic game, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I love it so much, but it's also almost like a game of chess, because you're trying to get the highest score possible, not just save your girlfriend, not just save the princess, you're trying to just get the biggest score. And this game has become very popular with the recent retrospective documentaries, but there's no doubt that I've always had a soft spot for this game. And just like Street Fighter 2, I feel like whenever I go into an arcade, it either has to have a Street Fighter 2 cabinet or a Donkey Kong cabinet. And thankfully, there's always a Donkey Kong cabinet, and I have so much fun playing it.
So anyway, guys, that is my top 10 favorite arcade games of all time, and by all means, this is not a definitive list. This is my humble opinion, and I know I left so many games out of the countdown, and what I want you guys to do is leave a comment below, tell me some of your favorite arcade games, and if you have a YouTube channel or maybe a blog or something like that you've talked about a similar subject, be sure to leave it as a link on the comment below on our Facebook group page on XS Gaming Podcast. I'll have a link to that Facebook group page below so you guys can join our community. I love to hear from you guys, and also, of course, leave a comment on the actual video too. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and as always, happy gaming.
Can't get enough of XS Gaming Podcast? Be sure to check out our audio podcast on podomag.com. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes. And if you have a YouTube channel or podcast you'd like to share, be sure to check us out on Facebook on our group page and join the community. As always, guys, thank you so much for all the support, and happy gaming.